Welcome to the People's Conference for Palestine in Detroit. This is a conference of over 3,000 activists, organizers, intellectuals who are all gathered here to talk about the future of the Palestine movement. As you know, this genocide's been going on for 8 months, but so has the resistance to it. Protests, disruptions, encampments have gone on non-stop since October and show no signs of stopping. So now many of the activists and organizers involved in the movement have gathered here to talk about the future of the movement and also what it'll take to see the full liberation of Palestine.
When we think of political movements, we think of big protests, powerful speeches, and dramatic major events. But what's often forgotten is the amount of organization it takes to make these things happen. The role of a political organization isn't just to give people space to vent. They have to develop an actual strategy with an analysis of what we're up against and a plan of action that helps people see that they can actually achieve something bigger by acting together, that it's not all just wishful thinking. Coming off of perhaps the most dramatic escalation in the movement yet 8 months in, the question of what happens next was the question before the movement for Palestine and precisely what the conference began to answer.
We were coming on the new year. We were reflecting on the fact that we had just been in many months of mass movement. We were looking at the situation on the ground, and of course you can't predict the future. It was very difficult to understand what was going to happen, but we felt that no matter what the scenario was, that we would need to be prepared, and we would need to at least have an initial moment when we can gather together so that we can build the kind of coordination among both the diaspora and the organizations of the movement.
The conference was held in Detroit, right next to Dearborn, which is known as the Arab American capital of the United States and the first city in the country to have an Arab majority. Many of the attendees were from the area, including many of the vendors, but the conference attracted people from all across North America who have been organizing and marching for months.
So I want to see who here is from California. California's big. Texas.
But the farthest conference attendees we met were from the Maori community, all the way from New Zealand.
Yeah, so as Māori, as Indigenous people back in Aotearoa, New Zealand, we unequivocally and completely stand in solidarity with the people of Palestine. Back home, we've been organising for 8 months with rallies and marches and snap actions with our Palestinian community, because the struggle for Palestinian liberation opens up possibilities for all of us Indigenous people worldwide.
One of the more notable features of this latest uprising for Palestine is that people who ostensibly have no personal stake in the issue have taken on the cause as their own. The movement has drawn heavily on different sectors of society that have rejected the notion that their struggles are somehow separate or unrelated. One of those people is Frank Scarcella, an organizer with Put People First PA, a group dedicated to fighting against healthcare profiteers in some of the poorest parts of the state of Pennsylvania.
Hospitals are closing across rural and urban regions. There is about a 9-county region in northern Pennsylvania that does not have a maternity ward anymore. You have to drive hours in any of those to just have a child. So there's no infrastructure really. You can't, no infrastructure for a family, no emergency rooms in some of the poorest regions of like Philadelphia. You have to drive to other parts of the city if you have an emergency.
So people have actually suffered like horrible wounds. People have died presumably because of this.
Oh, they die in the ambulance quite often. The fact that there are no longer any working hospitals in Gaza, that they don't have the fuel and they've been bombed out, these things have been destroyed with the money that we pay to our government to supposedly take care of us. Meanwhile, we can't get the healthcare we need. All of our hospitals are understaffed, underfunded. There's no beds even in the hospitals that still exist, and they're closing hospitals because they're not profitable. And that's disgusting when all of this money is being used for war. And we really have to expose that war economy that could be a caring, loving economy that takes care of the people here instead of bombing the people there.
This wasn't actually our first time talking to Frank. We met him in 2022 when we were making a short documentary about the work Put People First was doing in Pennsylvania. When the Israeli genocide began, they not only pivoted to protesting the war, but also connected the issue of healthcare access in the U.S. to its imperialism abroad.
I think Palestine has for a long time been at the center of anti-imperialist struggle, precisely because what we're talking about here is a small but brave nation that has been heroically waging a national liberation struggle against the most sophisticated and well-funded armies on the planet. And so I think people are moved by the Palestinian national liberation struggle. People are brought to it from various walks of life. Every type of poll shows that the American public wants to see an end to this genocide. And meanwhile, you have two political parties that are both continuing to support the genocide and supporting sending funds to the Zionist entity. And I think that's kind of a mask-off moment for people, where they're starting to see the facade of what's called U.S. democracy, and that's driving them into revolutionary struggle precisely because they see exactly what needs to be done in order to liberate not only Palestine, but also other oppressed people, including those in this country.
We also ran into Josephine Guilbeault, a former captain in U.S. Army intelligence who we first ran into at the vigil for Aaron Bushnell in Washington, D.C. It was Aaron Bushnell's sacrifice that inspired Josephine to speak out in uniform, and she's continued her activism for Palestine to this day and spent her Memorial Day weekend attending the conference.
You volunteer to serve for freedom, and then you're watching our own country oppress a people to a point of slaughtering the children. Now you have veterans looking in the mirror saying, why did I go there and sacrifice my own consciousness as a human being to kill someone who I was told was the enemy, when, as a matter of fact, I was being lied to? The only people that believe that Israel is the greatest ally are the people who are financially benefiting from the fact that Israel continues to be our ally. They are testing AI weapon systems right now on the Palestinians. We are not going to take those weapon systems, put them on a shelf to collect dust. If you look at the level of militarization in the police force within our country, even from the Black Lives Matter movement, we have advanced significantly to provide equipment, training. You look at what's happening to the college campuses, the police force, they are coming in Humvees. They literally look like the military coming and attacking American citizens.
This broad coalition of people coming together for Palestine has clearly frightened the ruling class. An article in the Jerusalem Post was particularly alarmed by the surprise appearance of Michigan Congresswoman Rashida Talib, saying that she was supporting terrorism. Here was Rashida's speech. Go ahead and listen to it and decide for yourself.
Doctor after doctor has come to my office showing me images of 6, 7, 8-year-old children with bullet holes in their skulls. Many of them showing me images of literally white phosphorus burning the flesh of their children's skin off. You are an enabler, President Biden. We want every single bullet, every single gun, every single weapon, bombs that we send is a sacrifice of our own schools here at home. Many of which, when I go into the schools, have garbage bags over their drinking fountains because they don't have clean water. It reminds me of what my beautiful, incredible black city reminded me, always, always. They remind me when I got censured, no one's allowed to tell you, shut up, but us, Rashida. They remind me that they can censure me, but they can't censure all of you.
The keynote speaker of the conference was Sanaa Daqqa, a revolutionary Palestinian journalist who is married to Walid Daqqa, a Palestinian revolutionary in his own right and a 38-year political prisoner. Walid recently succumbed to Israeli medical neglect and died in prison. While he was in prison, his comrades helped smuggle out his sperm, which was used to conceive his daughter, Milad, which means birth.
Walid Daqqa was a mountain in our national liberation struggle. And mountains do not move. They stand as a testament to the long path of our struggle. We are extremely, extremely honored to welcome Sanaa and Milad Daqqa as the keynote speaker for this conference.
هم في الجانب المظلم من الإنسانية، هم الوحوش البشرية. وكما قال وليد يوما على لسان ميلاد، أو قالت ميلاد على لسان والدها: نحن لا نخشى هذه الدولة وغطرستها، نحن من يصنع الحياة وهم يصنعون الموت. أيها الأعزاء، استمروا وعلوا الصوت واملأوا الساحات ضد هذه الهمجية العنصرية الصهيونية البربرية، وستبقى كلمات من سبقنا إلى المقاومة هي التي ترشدنا دائما بأننا لا نستسلم، إما ننتصر أو نموت.
The conference concluded on the same day of the latest Rafah massacre. Conference organizers immediately put out a call to action for a June 8th national mobilization to surround the White House to call out Joe Biden for his fake red line on Rafah.
After 8 months of this genocide, this People's Conference Steering Committee will show them that this is not true, because on the anniversary of the 1967 war that occupied our land in the West Bank and Gaza, we will mobilize a national action of a red line in Washington, D.C., outside of the White House, to show Biden that the people will draw the red line.
It's been a long 8 months, but when you think about what's happened in them, it feels like decades have passed. The movement for Palestine has pushed Israel into the weakest position it's ever been in, and it shows no signs of stopping. There's a long road ahead, but the U.S. is a key political front in this fight, and in just 8 months, it's clear that the movement has changed the balance of forces for years to come.
This is the, I think, reality of moments like this. Like, when we say they change the world forever, really, like, this is exactly what we mean. I oftentimes think about this in relationship to something that the Palestinian resistance oftentimes uses, which is this concept of tarakum, which means accumulation. And tarakum is used in the question of Palestinian resistance to refer to the accumulation of resistance or the accumulation of experience. And the Palestinian resistance will engage in different kinds of experiments in order to build experience and build that experience from one revolutionary period to the next. We now have so many people who are not only approaching the world with a new political clarity, but who have now also entered political organizations that are going to further sharpen their political clarity and that are going to prepare not only for the next moment, but even for tomorrow, right? For how we are going to end this genocide that we're fighting right now.
The movement has gone way beyond the ceasefire. And that's the thing, like, to struggle for Palestine, if you are going to actually commit yourself to the Palestinian struggle, you're going to inevitably ask yourself, why is this current iteration of the genocide happening? Suddenly you realize it's only a current iteration of it. It's been a long genocide. Where did that come from? Why is it that the US is constantly paying Israel to commit a genocide? And so it inevitably brings people to becoming anti-war, start to think about anti-imperialism, and then start to think, what would our project for society be if it wasn't US imperialism and Zionism? And that's a life project. That's committing yourself to struggle for a long term. That's committing yourself to a revolutionary struggle. I really do think that this has set the stage for a new era, and in particular with the newer generations. I don't know what's going to happen, but I do know that I think we're entering into a much more heightened moment of struggle, and it'll have its different iterations, but it'll be consistent.